Are the channels still buying programs as we move into the streaming era? And if they are buyers, what do their program schedules tell us about what producers want? Those are the questions that I'm exploring in my series of packed webinars with veteran programming executive and senior consultant, Dan Salerno. And today's candidates for Dan's forensic analysis are A&E and history. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, Peter, thanks. The feedback's been pretty great so far on the Discovery and the Nat Geo webinar. So thanks for you and PACT, and I hope people get a chance to check those out as well.
So Dan, A&E and history are in a very different place from Discovery and Nat Geo. They aren't legacy network brands that are now operating in the shadow of their corporate parent streamer. For example, Discovery Plus for Discovery Channel or Disney Plus for Nat Geo.
Yeah, that's true. We'll probably dip into that a little bit as we start to look at A&E specifically in history. But yeah, it's one of the interesting things about talking about these networks that they really are kind of almost an independent arms dealer, if you will, in the way they get to operate, which we can talk about, both the pros and the cons of that as we go through these.
All right, so let's get started, and we'll keep this important distinction at the top of our mind. Let's go and have a look at A&E.
Yeah, sure. So for the folks that are maybe coming to one of our webinars here for the first time, what we want to emphasize here, what we have is a sort of a snapshot of what the A&E schedule looks like. It's a fairly straightforward thing. A couple of things for people to take note of. Monday through Sunday is on the left side, going top to bottom in a typical broadcast week. And across the top is about a 5-month stretch that we've been tracking both the past and a little bit of prognostication for the future. In this case, we start really with calendar 22 in January, and we go through current period, the current quarter of first quarter 23, and a little bit into second quarter 23.
So Dan, I just want to say it's really hard to read the detail, but does it matter? Is it the detail that counts?
The detail itself, the specific titles are probably less critical to this discussion, Peter. What really I think is more important is that you sort of kind of take in the volume of color. All right, color in this instance, and the way we're looking at this, represents premieres. In particular, blue represents original and/or acquisitions, but something new to the network. And it gives you a very quick view, from a 30,000-foot level of, how much premiere content is a network presenting to its audience. And it then also starts to, as we zero in on it, where might the opportunities be for producers to pitch that network? What nights, what genres, what type of editorial. So, and we'll see the same thing with history.
So what are we looking at here?
Well, what we're looking here with A&E, I think there's a few things, and I'll try to point them out with a cursor really quick. If we were to look about a year ago in this general area, to the left of the grid, you would see A&E is programming about 5 nights a week with original content. And like I said, the specifics of the content are probably a little less relevant than the fact that they're doing 5 nights a week. That's a healthy volume of content. And it actually expands as we move into sort of the middle part of 22, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6 nights a week as they bring wrestling into the mix from the WWE. So once again, a really healthy, robust schedule here for A&E. But as we move towards the back part of 22 and into the current period, you can see that start to dwindle. White is basically a repeat. And you see a lot of white. Monday night, Tuesday night gets heavily white. Friday night remains white. Sunday night becomes white. And there are 2 things to take note of here. One, just the lack of premieres. There's a diminishment, a heavy diminishment, probably by about 50%, which means, are they taking a slight break in their commissioning and they're going to come back in a robust fashion early in 23, like we saw in 22? Or is this an indication of a pivot where they're downsizing maybe some of their commissioning? At this stage, we're not totally sure of that. We'll kind of keep an eye on that. But the other thing that is interesting to take note, although maybe not all that encouraging for folks who are looking to present new things, is that the repeats themselves are concentrated in one specific area, and that is crime and justice, and even more specific, their legacy series, The First 48. The First 48 has been around for, I think, about 15 years or so. It's closing in on 350 episodes as a legacy series, and it's dominating their schedule almost in every instance. But let's turn our attention to the premieres, because I know that's kind of what our packed audience wants to hear a little bit more about and where the opportunities might lie. You've got right now in January of 23, or actually we're in February, I should say, we're looking at 2 nights of premieres, roughly Tuesdays and Thursdays. Wednesday just finished up. You're going to see some new premieres with the next round of WWE content coming up in a few weeks. But basically, they're down to 2 or 3 nights of premieres. And I think the takeaway here that we'll talk about later is the role of legacy series in these things, and then where might the opportunities start to come in. I'll point one little thing out, and I would ask folks to make a mental note of it, and we'll refer back to it when we go through our talking points. And that is right here on Tuesday night. What you can see is some very thin lines. Again, the titles are not relevant, but a thicker one here is a 1-hour show. These are half-hour shows. We're seeing more opportunities with half hours on A&E. And in fact, what they tend to do is they do half-hour series on a few of these, start off with 2 episodes a night, and then they go to 1 episode a night that allows them to stretch it over a longer period of time. And it seems like some of their newer concepts that are coming into play are in that half-hour form. So maybe that's an opportunity for folks that are looking to develop concepts.
Well, let's go to history.
Yeah,
are we ready to go to history,
here.
or have you got more? We got more takeaways now.
No, I think we'll save some of the takeaways for a little bit later after we run through history. History, you're going to see, looks a little bit different. Now, history, you can see
it looks so Dan, it looks so different. There's a lot of color.
Lot of color. And again, I think that's the key is, color is a good thing. It's a good thing for networks. It's a good thing for advertisers, and it's a good thing for producers, right? Because more color means more opportunity. And this one you can see, unlike A&E, it was not only healthy in the early part of 22. In fact, in early part of 22, I don't know, you almost couldn't get any more robust with premieres on 7 nights a week. A viewer for history would find something new every night of the week. That's a nice statement to make, particularly in today's environment with pandemic slowdowns and COVID stoppages and the shift to digital and so forth. So I think the good news, though, for history is, in addition to that very good beginning in 22, is it's continued. Even today, here in the first quarter of 23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nights have got premiere content on it. And you're going to see more content showing up here in a little bit later with The Food That Built America, a new season. So they're coming in really strong here with new content. One of the things that I want to highlight here with history, though, is very similarly, half-hour series might provide an opportunity. We saw that with A&E, so it seems to be something that is kind of working across their portfolio. The existence of legacy series, we'll talk about a bit in the talking points, but legacy series are really the driver. Curse of Oak Island, American Pickers, Pawn Stars, Swamp People. These are franchises that have been around for a while, and they really drive. And then the other thing here is a small thing that we haven't really talked much about previously. Green, in this case, means shows that we know that the network has announced, but they have yet to announce an actual air date on it. So we sort of keep an eye on them, and we position them where we think maybe they'll land in some instances. In these cases, history is doing a number of tentpole specials, right? They did Abraham Lincoln a while back. They did Theodore Roosevelt. So they've got a few of these coming up, and they tend to kind of really build these tentpole specials, which we'll talk about in the talking points.
Are they doing music? Dan, I've heard they're doing big music specials.
Well, actually, that would be their partner in the portfolio, and I'm going to go backwards real quick with A&E. And you can see that here. The music specials are very good. They're under the Biography brand, and they're feature doc lengths or longer. All the way back here, they did Janet Jackson as a 2-night event. They've got a couple more of these coming up with Whitney Houston. They've got James Brown. So another great opportunity, particularly I think for PAC producers, if you've got access to a heck of an archive on a music artist, maybe that's something that the folks at A&E want to hear about. So something to take a look.
Let's go to our takeaways, Dan. Move ahead unless we're missing something on history. So linear must matter. What does that mean?
What we're referencing here for the folks that have joining us off the back of our Discovery and our National Geographic webinars, what we said with those is that linear still matters, right? And it does. As those two brands move heavily into their own digital space, where did linear fit? Well, with A&E and History, it's a bit different because they don't have an A&E Plus or a History Max to turn these things over to. So for A&E and History, not only does linear still matter, it has to matter because that is still a big driver of their core business. But likewise, the flip side of that is they're a digital free agent, as I referred to it. They've got content in all sorts of platforms. You can find their content on Discovery Plus. Last night, I think I was just looking at, was it Hulu? And I found some of the history content, the A&E content there. You can find it on AVOD platforms and FAST platforms. So A&E is very much, A&E Networks, I should say, is in very, very much a unique position to what Discovery and National Geographic were, where they've been withholding their content. Now, we can get into it maybe at a different time, Peter. Clearly, David Zaslav is trying to open up the vault for third-party sales in addition to navigating a blended HBO Max, but that's a discussion for a different day. But A&E Network's position as a digital free agent is an interesting position for them to be in that is unique compared to the Discovery and National Geographic.
I was thinking that A&E, instead of being a latecomer, and they've been late at so many stages. They were early into cable and satellite, launching A&E Network. It was one of the pioneer cable networks.
Yeah, 1980, I believe.
They got late into international and other developments in the business model. Here they hung back from launching their streamer and they were criticized, or I heard grumbling. But now I looked the other day, Peacock's lost $3 billion in its first year launching its streaming platform. And, industry analysts are so worried about the profitability of streaming. Maybe A&E and, with its History Channel leading brand, co-leading brand, made the right decision, holding back and being an arms dealer.
Yeah, I think, time will tell, right? I think you're right. I think 2 years ago, we would have probably been having a different type of conversation. And now it's
maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, maybe even 2 months ago. That's true. I will say, sometimes I think of A&E Networks in this situation almost like Sony, right? As a studio.
Yep.
Sony is kind of a free agent and can sell its content to where it fits the best, whether that's on Netflix. I think, like, if I remember, Cobra Kai is a Sony product, right? And it, it's wonderful on Netflix, but they can also turn around and work very direct with with HBO Max and with Disney Plus and so forth. So a very conscious decision on Sony's part, and clearly a conscious decision on the A&E Networks team as well.
All right. So let's move on here. Franchise brands carry the day. Are you talking about?
Yeah, I think we sort of touched on that. As we went through the grids there, I think it is one of the things that's important for producers to remember is that both networks have built, their schedule probably even more than some of the others that we have looked at, with multiple franchises. I mean, Pawn Stars that you mentioned, Peter, is the granddaddy of all. It's been around for about 14 years now. I think this is its 14th year, 20-some seasons.
2009, right after the global financial crisis. It was really developed as a response to that. We covered it in depth in my documentary business newsletter, by the way.
Yeah, I remember that analysis. It was a great analysis because I mean it's the gift that keeps on giving with these folks. And I think, even with the legacy brands, we talk about Pawn Stars, American Pickers is at 350 episodes and counting. Oak Island is sitting on its 10th season. Forged in Fire is a brand that you probably don't hear too much about, but if you're a history viewer, you know all about it. It's an amazing sort of stalwart of their schedule. I think it runs on Wednesday nights mostly, but there are well over 200 plus episodes of that series. So, they've got something going here. And what it means is that the opportunities, I think, for producers are in some ways to figure out how to work in between these legacy brands, because what they're clearly doing is they're not looking to replace a Forged in Fire or a Pawn Stars, right? But what they're looking to do is complement them. So it's the 10 o'clock show that comes out of those things. A recent example in the last month or so, A&E just launched a series called Dirty Old Cars. Very simple, half-hour series, easy concept, but it's very consistent. It's similar to Pawn Stars and Pickers in the transactional space. A couple of guys run a car washing business. So they've got all the backstories of maybe a car with a backstory that is beloved. You've got the owner of the car, so you get a human emotion story that goes with it. It's nicely done, and it complements off the back of their transactional stuff really well. So I think that's where opportunities lie on both brands. On history, you have things like Fast History. I think that came from the George Stephanopoulos Prodco. Simple, little half hours, little quick in and out history stories, which is kind of fun to watch. And those things sort of piggyback off of what they're already doing. The other thing they're doing on history specifically, and whether it seems to be a trend that is developing there, is some of their more celebrity-driven series. They've got a Peyton Manning series coming up. They've got one with Lawrence Fishburne, History's Greatest Mysteries, that is now running, I think, in its third season. So, good, strong history stories with a relevant celebrity base might also be an opportunity for producers to find.
So what do you mean by tentpole specials?
Well, tentpole specials, we sort of covered the tentpole specials a little bit when we talked about the music docs and the sort of the very strong blue chip event specials like Ulysses S. Grant, the Theodore Roosevelt, Abe Lincoln on history. They're using those as brand drivers and as audience drivers. They do really well,
Gotcha.
and they probably do about 2 a year, I suspect. I would imagine the opportunity is probably go for them if you can. I would never discourage somebody from going for it, but also recognize that they announce them quite far in advance, and maybe there are opportunities to do sort of programming that kind of tail off of it in a way that is related to it, as opposed to directly competitive against it. And then the last one is
acquisitions are extinct.
Yeah, not to sound too harsh there. I would imagine if there is an acquisition that fits and ticks all the boxes, I don't see any network turning down an acquisition that they can screen and post. But it's pretty clear, looking at their schedule for the last number of years and following through, that they're almost unheard of in the acquisition space. So I'm not so sure catalog programming is the best pitch. And because they don't have that digital platform to fill, they're probably a little less in the market, say the way maybe a Discovery Plus might be, where it's trying to get a volume as well as an editorial diversity.
You know what? My takeaway, kind of looking backwards, Dan, is Pawn Stars. You mentioned that Pawn Stars is running, I think, their 634th episode, and that probably doesn't include lots of spin-offs and such. So let's think about the financial picture involved. Let's say that the budget per episode is somewhere between $350,000 and $500,000. That's a $200 to $300 million business.
It sure is.
I mean,
it sure is.
It's enormous. The jackpot value of hitting a winning franchise series is enormous, but also it speaks to the barrier of creating a new one. How do you do better than that? You know, how do you break in?
Well, and I think, Peter, the question too is not only how do you do better, but how do you do better in 2023? Because the world is different today than it was in 2009. I think maybe that's a webinar for another day about, you know, the value of legacy series to these brands, and what does that mean maybe for opportunities for producers? Because if you can strike gold with one of those, you know, literally gold rush on Discovery, you know, Deadliest Catch is really, I'm sure, done very nicely for Tom Beers, and Pawn Stars here. I'm sure Brent Montgomery is you know, driving a very nice, expensive car based off the production fees that he's picked up over 600 episodes. So it's a position that we would all just we'd be blessed to be in if we could.
Okay, let's move on. Dan, what don't we know?
Well, this is a little bit shorter of a list, again, than what we've seen with the prior networks we've covered. But you know, two things that I sort of focused on. One is I'll start with the second one first, really, because we've touched on it already, and that's that, you know, the digital freedom that we've talked about that they have. Is it an opportunity or is it a liability? And like we said, I think, you know, 2 years ago, we were probably leaning liability. Now we're starting to wonder if it's not more of an opportunity. And, you know, 6 months from now, where might it fall? It probably will depend again on how the market settles a little bit as it continues to evolve. But it's a question that A&E Networks certainly has in front of it that is a little bit different than some of the others that we've covered. And opportunities, particularly for A&E, are there opportunities beyond crime? And that is still to be determined. I think producers that are in direct conversations might even have a little bit better of an insight than what we have from our perch. But you know, crime is paying off really well for A&E. But I think what's important about that is they don't brand themselves the way, say, Investigation Discovery does or Oxygen does. They still brand themselves as a mainstream, wide-reaching entertainment brand, which allows them to bring in WWE content on Sunday nights, Neighborhood Wars, and Storage Wars, and all of those sorts of things. The music docs and the feature docs, they really do blend in. So while crime dominates their schedule, at least right now, with the first 48 inventory encores, it's not necessarily how they're branding themselves as a network. Yet at the same time, they're clearly seeking original opportunities, and you can see that with some of their companion series that we've talked about, Accused, 60 Days In, things like that. They're still looking, I think, for content in that genre.
Well, this is great. Dan, next week or in a couple of weeks, we were going to cover TLC. We're going to get down to the reality universe, and of course TLC's really been the leader, and maybe I'm overstating it, but certainly a great player in the space. And in future webinars with PACT, we're trying to figure out how to cover Smithsonian, PBS, some of the other legacy networks. And so keep tuned in. And Dan, this has been really informative. You'll be able to find the detailed PowerPoints that Dan shared on my documentary business newsletter. And we look forward to being with you next time around. So thank you, Dan.
Well, yeah, thanks, Peter. And thanks again to both Documentary Business, of course, and PACT. It's really been really fun to see these start to develop now. And hopefully we've been getting a lot of great feedback. I'd love to see that keep going.
Good on you. See you next week.